Good evening, everyone. It is Julie Hedges, and welcome to the Tarot Journey. This is a very important show, and I thank you all for being here. I think this is my most important show that I have ever done as part of Star Nation's radio, and now transitioning to the Be Live TV. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, a very sensitive topic, a tender topic, and we are really going to explore and discuss, but support you, support the audience, support each other in telling our stories. The topic tonight is Say Something, Voices Over Violence. And it was put on my heart by Spirit to do this, and I knew that I needed to have some good support here. And I have two wonderful ladies who have donated their time this evening to talk about this topic of abuse and violence and sexual assault, and what happens when we speak up, what happens when we don't speak up, what happens when we watch others who have spoken up, and when we are supporting those who are speaking up. So, sorry, I have an itch there. I have two wonderful ladies with me, and I just want to give the disclaimer that the information here may bring up some personal issues and concerns and challenges that you have. So please be very aware of your own self-care, and engage your spiritual team, engage your friends, and engage any support personnel who are part of your life, part of your team, those that you go to for one-on-one support. And know that if this is really triggering some things in you, maybe this discussion could be put to the side. So there is no need to power through it, if you know what I'm saying. Please be tender with yourself. Please be sensitive to your needs, because this is likely to stir things up. The conversation this evening is about wholeness and wellness. And although this is a very timely topic that is playing out in our national stage, it is not relegated to the United States. It is all over. It is all time, unfortunately. But I do want to be very clear that we are going to be talking about this, discussing this in terms of the energy, in terms of feelings and experience, and not at all about what hat you wear, what team you're rooting for, what flag you're waving, or what party that you affiliate with. So I do want to make sure that is put to the side as we are talking this evening, because I want everyone to be included. I want everyone to feel as safe and as comfortable as possible to bring their stories forward, if it's comfortable for you to do so, and to be heard. So I would like to introduce my wonderful guests, who are psychotherapists with many, many years of experience. And they are also wonderful spiritual leaders. So they can talk to us and support us in those many realms: the mental, the spiritual, the emotional, and physical, to get us to resources that we might not have thought of, especially if we are in the midst of dealing with the traumas. So thank you all for coming online this evening. And let me introduce my two guests. While I'm doing that, I would ask you if you would like to share it on your timeline, share the show to groups who allow live feeds. anyone you think might benefit from this particular discussion. So I'm going to find the live stream on mine so I can see our comments scrolling up. So let me find the live stream right now. I don't often do this. Where is the live stream? Let's see if it's going to come up for me on my phone. So here we have Holly is in the chat room. Rob is in the chat room. Who else is here? I need to move this chat. Rob is here. Tracy is here. Thank you all for being part of this. And so let me introduce my wonderful guests. And I want to thank Neshi for producing tonight. So she's doing all the levers and pulleys so I can just talk to these wonderful guests. First up, I would like to introduce Ms. Terry Ruelle. She has been practicing psychotherapy for 32 years, working with individuals and specializing in women's issues. She's a licensed master's clinical social worker with extensive experience with substance abuse and mental health. She does acupuncture detox. She's also an EFT practitioner, a registered NADA trainer, and you can tell us what that is in just a minute, Terry. She's also a Reiki master and owner of Pathways Holistic Services. So welcome, Terry. Thank you for donating your time this evening to talk to us.
Thank you, Julie, and hello, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here and a privilege.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm. And let me also introduce our very own Nicole Fix. She is a writer for Star Nations magazine. She has a background in counseling with individuals and families, and she has her own private practice, Eastern Door Counseling, LLC. She's a limited licensed master's of social work and works in a crisis stabilization hospital. As I said, she does write for Star Nations magazine. Her column is about emotional health, so that's perfect. Along with her background, she is a Reiki master, an Amadeus healer, and her personal philosophy centers around transforming personal and collective darkness through the power of love. I just love that.
Thank you.
That's beautiful, Nicole. Thank you for coming online tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Oh,
It's an honor to be
definitely.
here.
Definitely. I'm still trying to find this live feed so I can get everybody's, so I can see everybody's comments because I keep losing them over there. So Marlene is here. Ingrid is here. Holly's saying hi, Julie, Nicole, and Terry. Rob says, preach, sister minister. Well, we're going to do our best to lovingly talk about a very sensitive topic. And like I said, this information may bring up some personal challenges that you have had, you yourself, or traumas of loved ones and friends. So please be very cognizant of your own self-care with that. So as we always start off the Tarot Journey show, I want to begin with a prayer. I want to begin with a centering. And this is a prayer that if you are familiar with Kundalini Yoga, you know that this is one that opens a Kundalini Yoga practice. And as it was taught to me, that it's 4 lines and 4 pillars of protection. And so what I think when I pray this prayer is that each pillar would be on my right and in front of me and on my left and behind me. And so I'm going to pray this twice. So we are going to think of it in terms of visualizing these pillars of protection, these pillars. For me, I think of them as light, white light. pillars of white light, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually surrounding me and surrounding us in this sacred space as we are talking about this very tender topic tonight. So wherever you are, if you want to put your feet on the floor and take a couple deep breaths and visualize these pillars protecting us and surrounding us with love and light tonight. Agre name, Jugagre name, Satgare name, Siri Guru Devi name, Agre name, Jugagre name, Sadgare name, Siri Guru Dev Name. Amen.
Thank you.
And so we are surrounded with light. And thank you, Rob, for putting those words in the chat room. So if you are interested in knowing exactly what we sang right there, it's the Ad Gare. Anne is here. Mary Anderson is here. Minnie is here. Thank you. Stacy is here. Wow. Thank you all for coming in this evening. Terry and Nicole, I read a statistic that every 98 seconds, someone in the United States is sexually assaulted. Let's see here. What do you think about when you hear that, Terry? When you see those statistics?
Well, I've over the years tried to go immediately to healing is possible, because you can get overwhelmed with the grief of this, especially after years, and seeing that it's still so prevalent. 1 out of 3 girls before the age of 18 is sexually assaulted, 1 out of 5 boys. So for me, I have to focus on there is healing, that healing is possible, and say a prayer that they will be able to get their healing as soon as possible, or to someone that can help them in that journey. They say, I read somewhere that action is the best antidote to despair. So the action for me is usually spiritual, to say some prayers, try to recenter, and then stay focused on the healing that's possible, and more possible now than ever. And that gives me a lot of hope. I think, was it in the 80s that Oprah really busted through the taboo of talking about sexual abuse. And it started a huge movement finally of healing and people being able to not feel so ashamed to reach out. And I think the Me Too movement has been the second wave of that now. I truly believe that darkness only has power over us when it's kept in the dark. Once we bring it to the light, it starts immediately to lose its power. And the more souls that are brought into that, the more faces that people see, the more we listen to each other's stories, more and more it dissipates the darkness, the fear, and the shame starts to heal. That's why 12-step groups are so effective in helping people heal, because you have many faces, many people around you continually accepting you unconditionally, if it's a healthy group, and helping you to heal your shame just by continuing to love you unconditionally or accept you unconditionally. And we know that fear and shame are the greatest things that keep us from healing.
Thank you. I love the emphasis on healing. Thank you for bringing that forward. Nicole, I know that we've had some sound issues. I was having a little bit on my end, and I didn't know if you were able to hear that about the statistic. Every 98 seconds, someone in the United States is sexually assaulted. What does that mean for you in your practice and your work?
Well, yeah, to somewhat piggybacking off of Terry, and I didn't hear everything that Terry said just because I wasn't able to hear for a few minutes, but sexual abuse is very prevalent, and the amount of trauma that, I see and its correlation to sexual abuse is so much more rampant than I think that we know. So hearing that statistic, I think, just affirms a lot of what, we see in the mental health world. And one of the things, with this, the wave of the Me Too movement, and women, as they become more, as we have one courageous leader really share her story, it gives other women more support and courage to share hers. And one thing that we know about shame is that it grows in secrecy. And I think that as these more and more people are starting to come out and say, that's not okay, I want to hear your story, we've got this wave of empathy that's connecting us all through being able to hear and listen, and this, I believe you, and I want to hear more. So, it's kind of this shake up of this hidden shame that's been sitting dormant, and empowering women and men to start to share their stories, as, in a supportive setting. And that's one of the things I think that works so well with therapy, is being able to have just that relationship and that place to safely talk about some of these things that have been hiding in the dark, and, like Terry said, bringing them to light so that they can heal. It's huge.
Thank you. Beautiful. I love that it hides in the dark, and it festers where there is silence. I appreciate what both of you have said about that. And I just want to say a quick hello to Sonia is here. Anne is here. Minnie is here. Stacy, thank you all. And thank you again, Neshi, for producing there in the background. She is in the lobby doing all of the levers and the pulleys. She's the woman behind the curtain, so we can have this wonderful discussion tonight. One of the kind of talking points that I had down, this is very much on our national stage right now. It's really played out in the last month about trauma, personal trauma, sexual abuse, and also the Me Too. And it's interesting that I went back and looked at that. The Me Too tweet that kind of went viral, Alyssa Milano, the actress, she had tweeted that. Let me pull that up. She said, this was exactly 1 year ago, October 15th, 2017. She said, "Me too," suggested by a friend. If all the women who have been sexually harassed or assaulted wrote "Me too" as a status, we might give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem. And so that wave began then. And, you know, there were a lot of stories that came forward out of that. But perhaps there was a sense of it was relegated to those in Hollywood, kind of the elite, those who had different kinds of lives, or, you know, not the regular everyday folks. But I think now what we've just seen with what's happened on our national stage is it is the soccer mom. It is the lady at the grocery store, high school girls. It's everywhere. It's everybody. Mm-hmm. And why do you think it's so hard to say, I have experienced sexual trauma? Let's start with you, Nicole. Do you have people, when they come to you, that there is a barrier they have to overcome before they can even say the words?
Absolutely. I mean, it's back, I think, to that deep-rooted shame. And, you know, there's so much has been hidden for so long. And, you know, a lot of concealment that goes on, and then the shame that grows there. And, you know, and so many people who have shared with perhaps a loved one who's, you know, turns it around and makes it like, you know, in some way, somehow their fault. And so there's just been this like epidemic before now where people are dismissed and, or feel responsible. And so they want to, you know, take away that factor of feeling ashamed as they bring it up. So it also hasn't, you know, the norm in our society has been to not talk about it and to not, you know, share those things. So there's a big vulnerability in bringing it up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that. And Terry, let me ask you the similar question. When people decide that they need to have some extra help for some things in their lives, is there a barrier with them to bring forward that kind of story? Do you have to dig to get to the root of that, or do you think people, when they have a safe place like that they can open up?
I think that's a huge difference, and thank you for starting us off by creating a safe container. I think that's essential. It's so important. I mean, if we don't feel safe, how are we going to be able to, you know, walk into that darkness, face the things that are the most scary, the most painful, and the most shameful? I think some of it is cultural, some of it's what we learn in our families. I mean, we live in a culture that really, we get a lot of messages that you're always supposed to be in control of yourself, and you're supposed to be able to take care of yourself, and if you don't, then you must have done something wrong. I mean, it can start at just such a, you know, that kind of level. And then, you know, being assaulted sexually is the most vulnerable a person can feel, other than totally life-threatening. But in a way, it's spiritually life-threatening, because your sexuality is your so much a part of who you are, that it can make you feel vulnerable in your soul. And that is a really scary thing to face, because we all want to feel that we're never going to be that vulnerable. Just like we all want to feel that we're never going to be in a life and death situation. So one of the first things we have to do is make sure that we create a very safe, or the person can help themselves create a very safe place to be able to go into those feelings. And that's one of the things we do in therapy. We start right off with creating a space in your home that is going to be your safe place where you can go and journal and do your work, where you feel you have all the things that you love around you that make you feel safe, that remind you that you're okay, that you didn't do anything wrong. So there's a lot of different things that we can do, but I think that's where we have to start.
Thank you. Thank you. I know that with these recent confirmation hearings, and particularly talking about Dr. Ford and her bringing her story forward, it really, I think, opened a lot of wounds. Marlene is saying in the chat room, it can take years for someone to truly love in an intimate way. Yes, because that creative center, the sacral chakra, is also our reproductive center. So bringing forth life is bringing forth our own lives as well. And to have that violated, to have that traumatized in one factor, having that experience, and then I think what we have seen is one woman is telling her story, there is a wave of, like, the shell's broken open for a lot of others. And then there's also this backlash. So I think we've seen a secondary hit. It's one to experience the trauma, and then to experience, how do I want to say, to experience additional abuse by, being mocked and shamed, and you're a liar, and all of those things. Neshi, would you mind to bring up the resources page for us that has Terry's websites and Facebook page, Nicole's website, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, the RAIN website, and I was on the RAIN website earlier, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. And according to this Time article, it says that they had a 338% uptick of reports and just in this last month with the Blasey testimony and the Kavanaugh hearings. And so what can we maybe share with someone who is a victim or who loves a victim, who is watching this person maybe floundering, or you yourself are floundering or shell-shocked, or whatever it is, seeing this play out in a national stage. Maybe it feels like your own story playing out, and you're seeing all of the backlash and the reintroduction of the pain and the trauma. Am I making sense with my question there?
I think so.
Terry, what would you say?
Well, I would first just try to listen and, let them process whatever they need to process. And reassuring them that victim blaming is always wrong. It's always wrong. And whatever reasons people are doing that, it's their stuff. And it has to do with them. It doesn't have to do with the person who was victimized or who's going through the trauma. And that it is re-abusing again. So they have to do extra self-care and ways to take care of themselves and protect themselves, and that you're there to listen But if they want to reach out and get more help, that you'll help them find that, and that they're not alone. And I think that's one of the greatest things that has happened from all this, is even though it's painful for all of us survivors to have to go through this backlash, I think the power of being connected and all of our voices and all of us supporting each other is stronger than the backlash. And I think if people can hook into that somehow, whether it's through social media or just private writing, they're going to feel more empowered, and it's going to help them to stand up against the victim blaming or the mocking. And there's a lot of practices that we can do that can help us not absorb that too.
Thank you for that, Terry. And Neshi has posted in the chat Terry's Facebook page, website, Nicole's website, the National Resource Center, the RAIN, Domestic Violence and Abuse, and the SNAP website about the priest, abuse by priest. Nicole, what self-care or other resources do you feel are important when someone is re-experiencing their trauma after possibly watching it play out on this national stage? What are some of your ways that you like to coach and work with people?
Yeah, and Terry was talking earlier about just the importance of safety. And so like any kind of trauma like that, especially a sexual kind, it's one of our most vulnerable aspects as humans. So just really honoring, I think, whatever comes up with in a safe way. So whether that be using a positive support, someone that you can talk with openly and honestly with about your feelings, that's going to listen and validate, one's story without trying to like judge or dismiss. Because associated with that trauma is typically so much criticism, like inner criticism and outer criticism. So I think, having like that external support, but then also I really focus on this self-compassion and really challenging more of the critic with a compassionate voice and nurturing ourselves in that way. And doing whatever will bring us some tidbit of compassion and how we care for ourselves. So whether that be taking, an Epsom salt bath, or getting a massage, or
So good.
walking the beach, or baking, something that's going to like really balance out the pain, to help us manage whatever's coming up. But I think being able to process those emotions, those thoughts, safely with the positive support, with professional support, but having a way to honor, acknowledge the emotions that are coming up is crucial, while also maintaining safety by performing some act of self-care.
Thank you. Thank you for some of those very specific ways that we can think about that. For myself, I know that in a space of I'm hurting, I'm floundering, I don't know where to go next, I have been triggered, I had to pull over myself. I was headed up to Wisconsin last week, right as the hearings were concluding and the Senate was taking a vote. I had to pull over on the side of the road, and I had a great big fat ugly Oprah cry, a soul crushing, heaving sob cry, because of all of the things that were stirred up for myself and where I have been in a personal healing journey, and then to see it play out as it was and feel a re-experiencing of all of the critic as, you know, out there focused on me. And I think it's important, and offering this for those who are in the chat room watching live and watching through the archives, coming up with your own self-care toolkit, like an emergency kit, so that when you are having this big fat ugly Oprah cry and you're on the side of the road and it's heaving sobs and you don't know what to do, there's not a lot of capacity, we'll say, to think straight. I knew enough not to keep driving. So what do you do? So I like the breath practice that Denise has taught, Denise Iwana, breathing all the way in to the tips of your toes and beyond, and exhale, and then breathing all the way to the tips of your fingers and beyond, and all the way up to the crown of your head and beyond. And it takes 30 seconds to do that, but that's a way to just kind of bring it together. And then when I get to a place where I can take an Epsom salt bath, I'm all over that. I love those Epsom salts, and I love that lavender. And I have personally used, writing has been a catharsis for me. I even started my own poetry website, juliesoliloquy.com. And so that has kind of just poured out of me since I began going down the rabbit hole, as I call it, last year. So that writing is very important to me. So it is one of my go-tos. Now, Nicole, you are a Reiki master and an Amadeus practitioner. Are those some modalities that you use in addition to your counseling services? And do you have availability in your schedule now to accept new people if our audience needs to talk to someone like you?
I do have limited availability.
Okay.
I have not yet incorporated the Reiki and the Amadeus into my clinical practice. That's not to say that I won't, but at this point I have not. But I do some work with like the chakras and how the chakras can correlate to like different avenues of trauma in our lives, and which I find really fascinating.
Oh,
wow. And I follow the work of Anna Dea Judith. I don't know if you've.
Oh, yes, yes.
She's a psychotherapist, but also does a lot with chakras. But that is something I certainly do, for my own self-care. And find, how things, you were bringing up the sacral chakra and the correlation to, the sexual trauma. And so just wanting to contribute to that, of how, working with that chakra and working with our emotions, those are all correlated in the same chakra. So, finding a way to like really outlet that in the soul's journey, as well as, this emotional and mental journey that we're on, and physical.
Excellent. So our viewers, please reach Nicole at www.easterndoorcounselingllc.com. And so Neshi does have that in the chat room, and it is on the resources picture that is made up. I have it posted in the Tarot Journey page, and we're going to feature it again. Thank you, Neshi. She's got it pulled up, easterndoorcounselingllc.com. So reach out to her. Nicole, I know you offer in-house services. Do you also work with people over distances, maybe via phone or Skype or something along those lines? If somebody is out of state, for example.
I am available to do that. There's limitations just around licensing, but yeah, I can certainly am available for consultation and, finding resources, I think, too, in the local area if you're needing someone more, immediate locally, who is available. So.
Excellent. Thank you. And everyone, she is in Star Nations magazine. So her articles are featured there about emotional wellness and balance and health. So please check her out, Nicole Fix. Terry, let's talk a little bit about your modalities and your resources that you offer to clients. What are some of the ways that you help people process through any of their stories?
Well, I try to work with everyone holistically. Not all people are open to that. Some people would just prefer to do the talk therapy, and that's fine too. That's a wonderful way to process and heal. But I like to combine it with the acupuncture and the Reiki the best, because the acupuncture works to help turn off that fight or flight button, which is one of the PTSD symptoms that a lot of trauma survivors experience, because it is a life-threatening sense that happens to your body when you're assaulted. People have what they call post-traumatic stress response, which is a normal response to an abnormal circumstance. So they feel like they're having a horrible response because it's that fight or flight. Your nervous system is in overdrive, it's hypervigilant. Even when you're trying to be calm, it's hard to really turn it off all the way. And the acupuncture is really great for doing that. It'll start to turn that fight or flight or freeze button off. It takes sometimes a few treatments, but then people will be able to start to carry that with them to where they start to feel centered and grounded again. And that, of course, helps us then to be able to start to cope with doing all the painful feeling work, because our body's not constantly charged with this, over energy. And the Reiki too. So the Reiki seems to be a wonderful complement to the acupuncture, but also people find it really helps them because you can do it, over the phone. I can send it to them. So I can do that as far as helping to start to relieve that stress response, release that stress. I mean, when these things happen to us, we have physical, reactions as well as emotional. So you've got all this cortisol in your system, it triggers all kinds of things. So the more self-care things we can do physically as well as emotionally, mentally, spiritually, it all is going to help someone start to feel better faster. And that gives you, I think, more of a sense of hope. It helps people feel more encouraged to keep going. The emotional freedom technique, the tapping, is another wonderful technique that people can have with them all the time, that you can use to turn off that fight or flight button. You can use it to help you cope with the grief, because a lot of this healing is like a grief process. And you go through those stages of anger and depression and sadness. And so it can take a lot of the overwhelm off to help you keep putting one foot in front of the other, which is, just about the best we can ask of ourselves when we're in the beginning of this healing process, because it's very difficult in the beginning. They have to almost relive, but if you're doing a lot of the self-care, you won't relive it so much. You're going to feel the feelings, but you're going to be able to cope with them. It's not like you're going to feel like the intensity is there like it was in the beginning. And so I think that helps a lot.
Okay. Now, do you have available, thank you, Marlene is saying, I agree with Terry. Thank you, Marlene. She's my dear cousin. It was just a couple hours away. We reconnected on Facebook, and I love her so much. Miss her. Marlene says, which acupuncture helps with fight or flight?
Well, that's the NADA protocol. That's the one that I do the trainings on. It's 5 needles in each ear, and it's a specific protocol for addictions, for PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or syndrome, grief and loss. It works on all the hard emotional stuff. So it's a great protocol for the healing because it really targets those areas. And it, like I say, it works on the nervous system to actually rebalance it and turn that fight, flight, or freeze button off. It shouldn't be going on, unless we have to jump out of the way of a bus or something. But when you've been traumatized, it gets pushed on so hard and so long, or it might just be so hard because it's such a life-threatening incident, even if it was a short period, that it can't go off. But you can't, it just won't go off by itself sometimes without help. In fact, they're using this now in the military right on the battlefield with the soldiers because they found if they do it immediately after they've been in a battle or wounded, that button goes off right away and the energy is released. So it doesn't have time to seat in their body, which is what happens from trauma. That energy gets stuck in there. And so, you're constantly battling that, which is no wonder people don't want to feel it because it, feels like you could die. I mean, literally, it sometimes feels like I'm dying. So, it's very hard to go to that place. And this helps, like you say, to start to release that energy out of the body so that people can go there without that charge. I mean, the feeling is still there, but there's not an electrical charge to it like there was. And so, like you say, with post-traumatic stress disorder, it actually will, the sooner you can do it, the better, because it will actually not be able to seat in your body then.
Thank you for that.
And I think you can do that with the tapping too. I think if people, the more they tap, the more you're going to release that and lessen that charge.
And so people can get a hold of you, Terry, through thecentrabuilding.com, and also a lot of resources on your Facebook page, facebook.com/Terry Pathways. And so you work with people one-on-one in office, and also you work with people over distances, phone, Skype. You do? Okay. So our audience may want to get in touch with you, and you have availability in your schedule that you might be able to work with someone? Okay.
And excellent. I do take Priority Health. That's the only insurance I take anymore is Priority Health because I'm sort of semi-retiring from the insurance company.
Oh, I hear that they can kind of be painful.
It takes a lot of energy.
One thing that has been brought up with these recent events played out on the national stage is, well, it happened 30 some odd years ago. Why is she just talking about it now? Why didn't she do something about it then? Why didn't this happen? Why wait? Oh, can we believe that? That was so long ago. Is it possible or probable that it's a big deal now, even though it happened 36 years ago? I think that's what it was. Her story, I'm talking about Dr. Christine Ford, experienced this when she was in high school. I think it was over 30 years ago. Is it possible, Nicole, for something like that to just all of a sudden come out of nowhere? What say you to people who are asking those questions?
Well, I'm guessing, and then I think she even addressed this, Dr. Ford herself, but she has been talking about it with people that have earned the right to hear the story. And that's not
good.
something that I think she would ever publicly have shared, but for the fact that her, the perpetrator is someone that's being confirmed to the Supreme Court. So I can guarantee you that if anyone's, who you're accusing of doing this, we're going to be seated on the Supreme Court, one may vocalize in a different way than sharing it with a professional support and close friends and family. So I'm very much guessing she's been talking about this. She's been dealing with it. She's been healing it, if not having already done all of that. But considering the significance of his appointment, she felt compelled to share it on a public level.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that. I love what you said, that she's been probably working on it with people who have earned the right to understand that story, to have that part of her vulnerability and to see her through that darkness into the light. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and just saying, for anyone that's experiencing and feeling like, should I be sharing my story? I mean, that's such a personal decision, because there are so many vulnerabilities, and one to be explored with, utmost thoughtfulness and consideration for the impact that it may have on, one's ability to function through that. But her case is extreme.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Another part of this whole public stage that we have seen is the assertion, I suppose, that young men are now extremely vulnerable because of the possibility that they could be accused of rape now. And there are some who are really concerned about that, Terry, and others are kind of shaking their head. But in your practice, in your experience, how prevalent is it that the folks that you've worked with have been accused of rape and need services to heal that? Does that my question kind of make sense?
Yes. Okay. And I have never encountered that. The percentage of a false accusation is less than 3%. And that's of the 65% of people who even come forward. So, I've had people approach me about that. And what I say to them is, I have 3 sons and 5 grandsons. And the statistics are much more what my worry should be, that they could be assaulted before the age of 18, my grandsons, than they could ever be accused of, false accusations. So, I think there's a lot of people who, the fear mongering and that's being put out there is really way out of proportion to the reality. I'm not, to never take away from anybody who may have been through a false accusation, but that is a very, very rare. And
less than 3%.
Some of the statistics say 3 to 8%. Some of them say 2%. They've kind of settled on 3%, but like I say, that's even of the 65% that we think even ever come forward. So if we knew, the 100%, it might even be less than that.
Wow.
Well, and if I may add, I mean,
Yes.
I like how Terry talked about, like, her sons or grandsons are more likely to be victims themselves. And I think that's really important to emphasize, that men are also victims of sexual assault and abuse and trauma, a lot more than discussed and talked about. So, this isn't, this is both sexes that are being, affected here. So it's much more prevalent than the false accusations for both genders.
Thank you for bringing that out. Yes. So I hope I have not done a disservice this evening of feeling like excluding anyone who has experienced trauma and violence and brutality. Thank you, Nicole, for bringing that forward. And I agree with you. I think that there is the stigma and maybe a machismo or whatever, or just you are supposed to be able to take care of yourself. And I know that's one thing that you talked about earlier, Terry, that keeps people from opening up or feeling safe to open up. Like, I should be able to handle this. I should get this. Mm-hmm. Dina is saying it's so crazy how people don't believe you. Family doesn't really know how to deal with it because they have to look at their own stuff. Mm-hmm. Ooh.
That's why
Ooh.
It's so important to find somebody who is trustworthy, that people want to talk to, that they're going to be supportive and hold your sacred experiences as sacred, because it only, like say, re-abuses people to try to tell people that are going to blame the victim, that are going to support them. Like you say, people have to earn the right to, they have to prove, trust is something that we have to prove. It's not something we have to just give to somebody who may not be trustworthy.
I know that every story is different. Rob is saying people who have never experienced it love to tell people to get over it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was in the past, or it was when you were young, or it's whatever. I know that every story is unique, every person and every journey is unique. Is there any consensus as in a possible timeline from opening that door to say, me too, this happened to me, this is my story, this is my journey, to feeling like maybe I can stand on my own 2 feet, maybe I can take care of myself, maybe this was not my fault, maybe I can get to the other side, maybe I can actually have good relationships and feel safe in my own life? Is there any kind of large window, small window of saying from the beginning of your journey to, hey, maybe I can make it? Is there anything that can be shared there, or is that way too wide of a swath? Nicole, Terry, who would like to weigh in on that?
Who wants to go first?
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Go ahead, Terry.
Any typical timeline?
Well, if I could tell you that I had a lady who was in her 80s who told me of sexual abuse and assault for the first time in her life. She had never told anybody. So she had her whole lifetime of experiences of how that had affected her, where it had blocked her in her life, the losses, the many, many losses she felt because it had stopped her from so many things. And then, of course, the loss itself of being abused. So the grieving process for her was, several grievings about different things. But yet she said it was so liberating, it was worth the grief.
Oh.
So I think it's just so individual, that it just depends on how it's affected a person's life and how much loss they've had on top of the loss of, like I say, the abuse itself is a loss of who your own safety, who you thought you were going to be, or how you thought you were going to be, just all those ideals. So it's just so individual. I don't know if there's a way to put a timeline.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
What would you like to?
I'm sorry. I was just going to say
ahead.
that's what I hang on to. That I think is we have to hang on to while we're going through that grieving process. Is that it is liberating, even though it's very painful. It's very freeing, and you start to be able to trust again, which is what we all want to be able to feel connected. And it's very hard to feel connected to anybody if you don't trust.
Thank you, Ingrid, for sharing that in the chat room. My mom shared with me when she was 80. She was raped at 15 in Detroit. She was crying so hard. I was speechless and I just listened. So here's another real life example of all that lifetime of buildup and loss. Thank you, Terry, for sharing that. Thank you, Ingrid, for sharing that in the chat room. Nicole, is there anything that you would like to add to that possible timeline? I know it's all so individual.
It is. Yeah, I work with people in crisis often, and I have seen people who it's coming up fast and furious, but they're in a place where they're safe enough physically and emotionally where they want to put it on the table. And some of the most greatest growth that I've seen and been part of has been the liberation that Terry talks about in this crisis moment of sharing it with people who are, validating and compassionate and empathetic towards the experience, and the freedom that comes in doing it in a safe way. You can just feel the energy of it all happen, and it's like shedding away of these layers that have been defining how someone is, seeing him or herself. So, whether it be at a younger age or an older age, at a slow pace or a fast pace, there is no right or wrong answer. It's just really being gentle and using, your own intuition and ensuring safe supports to do it. So, but knowing that there is the tremendous amount of liberation and freedom that comes in doing it.
Wow. Thank you both for being so encouraging to show someone that there is light beyond that door of darkness that maybe has them trapped or a loved one trapped in that. Dina's saying it's an onion too, layers and layers. Mm-hmm. And when you're in a safe relationship, the depth of trauma resurfaces, but cleansing. So thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I want to thank my two guests this evening. Thank you, Nicole, for your expertise and your beauty and your insight. And Terry, thank you for all the wonderful gifts that you have brought forth and the support that you offer us. And I want to close out with, I'm calling it a prayer, but you might think of it as a poem that some of us know. And Neshi, I would ask, could you bring up the photo of the woman with the wings, please? Yes, when you stand up in front of the whole world unafraid to express your truth, you clear an easier path for others to do the same. And so this prayer, this poem that I'm going to close us with, it'll take me 98 seconds to read this. And in those 98 seconds, I remember at the beginning of the show, it said every 98 seconds someone in the U.S. is sexually assaulted. But I offer this as a prayer as we are all together in this sacred space. And this poem is being shared. This prayer is going out, that not this 98 seconds. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide. Welling and swelling I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. That was from Still I Rise. Thank you, Maya Angelou. Thank you, my two guests this evening. And as I close the program, the Tarot Journey, as I always do, thank you all for being here, and may the peace that surpasses all human understanding be with all of you. Om Shanti and good night.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks for raising awareness on this subject.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Namaste.